COVID cases are up, but hospitalisations and tragic deaths are a fraction of where they were this time last year. But don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. Don't spoil the fun of most of the media who are desperate to see us locked down and restricted once again. The most recent government press conference chaired by the Health Secretary Sajid Javid was harder and more painful to watch than the nightmare on Elm Street. It was the nightmare on Downing Street, following a chilling performance from a ghoulish health secretary telling the public they must play their part in order to enjoy Christmas with loved ones. I found the whole display dreadful. Warning that COVID cases could reach 100,000 a day this winter, a figure disputed by many, Sajid Javid urged those offered booster jabs to come forward, not just to save lives, but to keep your freedoms too. How sinister is that? Forget about Christmas. It looks like Halloween has come early. Now, you would expect the media to push back against this hellish megalomania, but oh no. Journalist after journalist on Monday from all of the major TV channels and newspapers wanted to know why we're not already masked up and locked down. The medical establishment, perhaps understandably, are pushing for more measures. Top palliative care Dr. Rachel Clark has tweeted the following. I want to see, she writes, low-key measures like mandatory masks, home working and social distancing brought back ASAP to A, protect society's vulnerable members from COVID, and B, help the NHS carry on caring for all of our non-COVID patients. Now, an excellent and committed doctor, no doubt, but there is a widespread assumption that these unprecedented measures work and that they're without significant harm. Except the science on this is not settled at all. Professor Jay Bhattacharya from Stanford Medical School has called lockdowns the biggest health cock-up in history, and Professor Sunetra Gupta has argued against mask mandates since day one, and she is one of the most respected virologists in the world. So when it comes for those pushing for Plan A, Plan B or Plan C, shall you tell them or shall I that these measures are not simple and not low-key? Shall you tell them or shall I that they are not without harm? Shall you tell them or shall I that evidence around the efficacy of masks is debatable at best, and that countries that didn't lock down or have mask mandates often have a lower per capita death rate from COVID than those who did? Shall you tell them, or shall I, that the UK government is being accused of being willfully negligent for not implementing the restrictions Wales has, except that Wales have the highest infection rate in the UK? It could just be that the virus is going to virus. So when will this lockdown mania end? When will we see a challenge to the COVID cozy consensus that equates these tough, economically ruinous, socially damaging interventions with the control of the disease? In country after country and in graph after graph, the case for all of these measures is crumbling, and the case for letting people exercise common sense and make a judgment for themselves gets stronger every day. And don't get me started on the perpetual junk modelling that we've seen for the last year and a half. I'd rather put Mystic Meg in charge, frankly. Take a look at this graph shared by friend of the show, Christopher Snowdon. He writes, if things get much worse, we might hit the bottom end of the lowest confidence interval of SAGE's most optimistic scenario. So you'll see from those lines on the graph, the SAGE doomsday modelling. Well, that red dot at the bottom is where hospitalisations actually are. And that tells you everything you need to know about these recent predictions. Now, I believe that any future COVID measures will be a smokescreen for a different man-made crisis, the 12 million people on an NHS waiting list. The health service will come under pressure this winter, as it always does, but it will be far worse this year, not due to COVID, but due to the ignored other illnesses that have been a direct result of the NHS closing its doors to the public for a year and a half. Now, I don't blame our brilliant NHS frontline doctors and nurses. I blame SAGE, the government and NHS managers. Since April 2020, I've been saying that these measures will kill many more than the virus itself. What is beyond doubt is that these measures wreck lives. And I'm not sure why it's okay to wreck lives. And it's now clear that economic damage and untreated other illnesses pose a far greater threat than the virus itself. So where do we go from here? Because some people agree with me, others vociferously disagree. Well, as always, freedom is the answer. I just want people, you and me, to have the choice, as they have in Sweden and elsewhere. In fact, the whole of Scandinavia have now declared the pandemic over. I'm interested by this tweet from the excellent comedian Nick Dixon, who sent the following message. He says, I spoke to my representative for Boomer Middle England, aka my mum, today. She scoffed at the idea of more restrictions, citing the vaccine and boosters as the key difference. As I suspected, they will struggle to get the normies on board this time. Interesting point he made. The normies, regular people, you and me. In the end, one of the main reasons why the government have inflicted these measures on us is because of opinion polls. They know that they will get away with it because the public have supported the measures. Well, if the public mood changes, which I believe it will this winter, with more people worried about cancer than COVID, more people worried about their job, their livelihood, their business and their kids than this largely non-fatal virus, then the game will be up. This doesn't end until the public vote with their feet. If enough people wake up and form an opinion that, frankly, this has got to stop. The truth is that so many of these commentators live in large, comfortable houses with sprawling gardens. They can afford future lockdowns as they await their Ocado delivery and as they have drunk wine-tasting sessions on Zoom with their friends in Hampstead. But most people can't afford further COVID measures this winter, and the country can't afford it either. And some of this is political. Look at the pathetic hypocrisy of Labour MPs, as pointed out by our brilliant Tom Harwood here at GBNews. Masked up in the Commons and yet mask-free at their conference. What does that tell you? Even rock star Billy Bragg has said that his mask is now a political choice. He tweeted, I was asked why I was wearing a mask this morning whilst ordering breakfast. Did you see those images of the Commons, I replied, with a barefaced government facing the masked opposition. I don't want anyone in here thinking I'm a Tory. Why are so many supporters of lockdowns voices from the left? Because they are reckless about the economy, they don't place any value on freedom and personal responsibility, and they love controlling people and telling people what to do. Stop telling us what to do. It's enough now. The vast majority of the media and many on the left just don't want this to end. They don't want this to end. They do not want this to end. But they don't decide when this ends. You do.